You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'm really excited about today's show. We have a 2-segment exclusive roundtable with 3 psychiatrists who are part of a drive among mental health experts to raise grave concerns about Donald Trump's mental and emotional condition and what to do about it. They are all 3 contributors to the book that is on the bestseller list now for quite a few weeks, called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. That's going to be a fascinating discussion. And we also have Surrealism Corner, and today we have a brief word from my lower self, and of course fighting words. But before we get any of that done, we need to go inside the headlines. It occurs to me that one reason we feel exhausted by the news is not just that it's been so relentless and bad, but because it's the same news. Trump being obnoxious, embarrassing, and frightening us and the whole world. Another cabinet member, this time Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, linked to Russia. Sessions, the malevolent elf, back in the headlines again, this time along with Carter Page, the missing link between Forrest Gump and Golem. And now another gun shooter, with the invariable past history of domestic violence, another open carry state, another massacre, another failed system of background checks, another makeshift shrine of candles and flowers, another averting of the national gaze from our public health epidemic of guns, another and another. It's tempting to just log off. Fortunately, we didn't, don't, and won't. Evidenced by last week's special elections where, for the first time, grassroots activism did translate to the ballot box. The showcase governor's races in New Jersey and especially Virginia. In fact, it looks like the Democrats may have run the table in Virginia. They're only part of the story. Maine pushed back against its governor and voted for Medicaid expansion a 3rd time. Charlotte, North Carolina got its first African-American woman mayor, Vi Lyles. Jenny Durkin became Seattle's first woman mayor since the 1920s and its first out lesbian mayor ever. Manchester, New Hampshire, first woman mayor. Flint, Michigan, Karen Weaver survived the recall vote, and so on. Women drove the numbers, 22-point gender gap overall. And in Virginia, 61% of the women's vote. Diversity flourished in a direct response to Trump. Asian Americans, Latinas, immigrants, a Sikh, a Vietnamese, you name it. My favorite of all is an African-American woman named Ashley Bennett, who ran for freeholder in Atlantic County, New Jersey. That's sort of like the city council freeholder. And earlier this year, on a visit to the then freeholder's office, he cracked a nasty comment about the Women's March, which Ashley had attended. She walked out, highly offended. Then she made up her mind to take his job, and last Tuesday she took that guy's job. Oh, 2018 is going to be very nice indeed. So all of us back to organizing. It is working. Oh, and enrollment in Obamacare is soaring. Ha ha! In a follow-up to our takedown of big tech last week, we learned that 8% of Facebook is owned by Yuri Milner, a Russian billionaire investor who also owns 5% of Twitter and whose Russian state-controlled companies made investments in Google. All of this is Guardian reporting. VTB Bank and the financial arm of the state oil company Gazprom sent funds to Yuri to purchase hundreds of millions of dollars of shares in U.S. social media platforms. What do you know? Milner also holds a significant number of shares in a company owned by Jared Kushner. Lots of dots to connect. Survivors speaking out about sexual harassment and abuse continue steadily in a great wave of truth. Women in the Oregon state legislature are up in arms about it, and women in the Florida Senate have accused the budget chair of groping. The U.S. Senate itself is hardly immune, as we always knew. Senators Claire McCaskill, Mazie Hirono, Heidi Heitkamp, and Elizabeth Warren publicly confirmed to meet the press their stories, as could every other woman in the Senate and the House if she chose. As an aside, it's interesting that Kevin Spacey's alleged victims were instantly believed, whereas apparently it takes thousands of women coming forward before one is taken seriously. Internationally, the world is holding its breath as Trump roams around Asia. Italy has banned all circus acts, but has not decided what to do about Berlusconi. Syria, even Syria, under the tyranny of Assad, has joined the Paris Climate Accord, leaving only the United States opposed. The large plague outbreak that began in Madagascar in August, to which nobody paid any headlines, has so far killed 127 people, though now it appears to be waning. And 26 young women between age 14 and 18 from Nigeria were found dead in the Mediterranean, along with 400 living migrants rescued in recent days. The International Organization for Migration estimates that 80% of Nigerian girls who arrive in Europe by sea are victims of trafficking. But we can't close out headlines without a shout-out to that Twitter employee who last week briefly shut down Trump's account on her last day of work. Guerrilla warfare with a tweet. You gotta love it. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with a peek into the Surrealism Corner, and then our exclusive double segment, Roundtable on Trump's mental health, the dangerous case of Donald Trump. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back, just in time for the Surrealism Corner. Rick Perry, now head of the agency he had first tried to sue, then forgot existed, and finally admitted he had no idea of its purpose. Yes, that Rick Perry, now Secretary of Energy, has announced that fossil fuels will protect women from sexual assault. Come again, you say? In telling a story about a village girl in Africa who wanted to be able to read by electric light instead of by a smoky fire, Perry decided to add, quote, "But also from the standpoint of sexual assault, when the lights are on, when you have light that shines the righteousness, if you will, on those types of acts. So from the standpoint of how you really affect people's lives, fossil fuel is going to play a role in that, period," close quote. Not a thing you might notice about how, if a child had a solar cell on the roof to power a battery for her reading light, that might work. But, it's so comforting to learn that we now have a solution for sexual assault. Big oil. A landscaping dispute between libertarian, contrarian Republican Senator Rand Paul and his neighbor left the senator nursing broken ribs. The neighbor, who has lived next door to Paul for 17 years in their well-to-do gated neighborhood in Kentucky, reportedly flung himself on Paul, who didn't hear him coming. I'm sorry, and I really disapprove of physical attack, but I find this story quite funny. I keep thinking how dreary it must be to live next door to Rand Paul for 17 years. Rand grows pumpkins on his property and has a compost pile that tends to attract rodents. He scoffs at neighborhood regulations that deny him this right in his libertarian compost pile. There's also that that just so curly hair and that nasal whine of a voice and that attitude which is utterly unsullied by one smudge of humor. His father, former Congressman Ron Paul, projects the same grating qualities, and I've often thought the two of them need the balance of a third, and I have a good candidate. It could be Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and Rue Paul. A network of conservative operatives has been building a right-wing counterweight to Emily's List, the organization that backs Democratic female candidates who support abortion rights. The new group is called Winning for Women. Its backers include Betsy DeVos, the Mercers, and TD Ameritrade founder Joel Ricketts and his son. They plan to back arch-conservative opponents of reproductive rights like Senate candidate, currently Representative Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. The organization wants to address the chasm between the number of GOP women versus the number of Democratic women in office, but these people still seem unable to fathom that changing their look and their message without changing their policies is meaningless. For example, representatives of Winning for Women say that they're frustrated by the Democrats branding subjects like abortion as an issue of women's rights. What? When it's really an issue of fetal rights? Church rights? Men's rights. But here's a thrill. Especially pleasant, since it looks as if these folks picked up the idea from a program we did not long ago about a German town that pranks neo-Nazis by turning their marches into fundraisers for groups against hate. On November 10th, activists of the absurd in Charleston, South Carolina, staged a hate parkathon to celebrate Steve Bannon speaking in Charleston. Parkathon donors pledge funds based on the total number of cars coming to hear Bannon, and they will be counted at the event. Pledged funds will go to anti-hate organizations and human rights groups. I'm delighted we spread the news, hoping for copycats on this one. The more the merrier, and the more surreal. And now to our exclusive Roundtable. A new book just recently out called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president has become an instant overnight bestseller, and with good reason. It answers some of the questions that so many of us have, and it raises others, and we're very fortunate because today we have with us 3 of those 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts who do this assessing, and in fact they are the 3 women who are behind the entire upheaval in the mental health community that produced a conference and this book, and people actually coming forth with their concerns. The people who will be joining us today, to my great pleasure, are Judith Herman. Dr. Herman is professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and a renowned expert in the traumas of interpersonal violence and the author of the now classic Trauma and Recovery. She's a co-founder of the Victims of Violence program at the Department of Psychiatry at Cambridge Health Alliance, and she's the winner of a great many honors and distinguished achievement awards. Dr. Nanette Gartrell is also with us. She is an American psychiatrist, a researcher, a lesbian activist and writer, the author of over 70 research reports on topics ranging from medical student depression to sexual minority parent families. Her investigation into physician misconduct led to a cleanup of professional ethics codes and the criminalization of boundary violations. Her papers are lodged at the Sophia Smith Collection at Smith College. And our last participant, but not least, is Dr. Dee Mosbacher. Dee is a psychiatrist and Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker who was formerly on the faculty of the University of California, San Francisco. And as a public sector psychiatrist, she has specialized in the treatment of patients with severe mental illness. And was also one of the founders of Woman Vision. This is a very stellar panel of wise women, and honored and grateful to present it. So Dee Mosbacher, Judith Herman, Nanette Gartrell. Distinguished women. Dee, Nanette, Judy, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. It's a real honor to have you here.
We're very happy to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled. We're thrilled to be here. Thank you, Robin.
Well, it turns out, I say this as an envious author, except that you deserve it. It turns out you have written a best-selling book, the three of you plus other psychiatrists, psychologists, and concerned experts, because the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. And it was edited and assembled by Bandy Lee, Dr. Bandy Lee, organizer of the Yale Duty to Warn Conference, and published by St. Martin's Press. The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. And it is, when I last checked, number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list, both for an ebook and a paper, and a cloth-bound book, a hardcover. So congratulations. To start, one of you, by telling briefly how this book came to be, because you were the crusaders on this from the very beginning. Not surprisingly, 3 women. Just tell us how it came to be.
This is Judy. I'll start. I was so anxious personally, right after the election, that I wrote a letter to President Obama, basically saying that I was worried about the mental stability of then President-elect, and I wondered if there was a way to have him examined and evaluated by a full medical and neuropsychiatric team, an impartial team. Mm-hmm. When I looked for signers of my letter, I thought immediately of Nanette and Dee. I had worked with Nanette many years before on the Committee on Women of the American Psychiatric Association, and we had taken on the establishment in order to investigate sexual misconduct by psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. And so we had a good fight, and we kind of won that fight. We were able to do a study and publish it. And it was part of the kind of house cleaning, I call it, that happens when women enter a previously all-male or male-dominated profession. So Nanette and Dee were my co-signers. We sent the letter to President Obama at the end of November. We never heard back from President Obama, but I think Nanette can tell what happened next.
A few weeks later, we were contacted by a journalist who wanted to speak to Dee and me about Trump's diagnosis, Donald Trump's diagnosis. And Dee and I got on the phone with Judy and talked with her about what we should do regarding this letter. And we made the decision that we would share this letter to Obama with this journalist so that it could become part of the public discourse. And we did. And 2 days later, it was published in Huffington Post, and it went viral, which brought you, Robin, and Gloria Steinem into our circle, which Judy probably can tell that part of the story.
I was contacted by Gloria, who I had known and, of course, deeply admired for years. And she and you, Robin, were concerned, remembering the history of Nixon's last days in office, when it was apparent to his inner circle that he was paranoid and intoxicated all the time.
Yeah, and threatening war. And threatening war.
And threatening war, yes.
Well, this is proud full disclosure, listeners. Gloria called me and she said these remarkable women who did the cleanup of the psychiatric world in terms of sexual harassment of patients, etc. And of course, I knew of your work, all three of you. And they've done this letter, and I knew of the letter which had gone viral. And that they'd sent it to Obama, who at that point, of course, was lame duck, and hoped he could do something, but I knew there was not much that he could or probably would do at that point. But what has stuck in my mind, you're quite right, was Schlesinger talked about it in his own memoir, and I think Kissinger did as well, but that this was common knowledge that the Secretary of Defense, then Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs had made a pact that if Nixon gave the order to press the button, they would countermand it, and they sent it down the line. And that I hadn't known, of course, at the time. We were all terrified. Nixon was roaming the White House half naked, drunk, and saying, "End the world, end the world." So I passed that along in the hopes that somebody could get it to the Joint Chiefs. And that's really all that was my whole, non-major contribution, but I was so proud, and I am so proud to this day to have been even the tiniest cog in the wheel of what brought about the conference and now this book and all the work that you've been doing. I think we did find a way in to get the letter or some form of the letter to the Joint Chiefs. And obviously,
literally, this is Nanette. It literally, we with very creative women's networking, we got it delivered to his office.
Ain't women grand? Then there was the conference. Somebody pick up and take it from there.
Yes, this is Judy. Well, let's talk about another remarkable woman, and that's Bandy X. Lee, a forensic psychiatrist at Yale. And herself a very courageous person. She had been trying to circulate a letter among psychiatrists suggesting whether Mr. Trump was committable on grounds of his dangerousness.
Yeah.
And she is the one who dreamed up the idea of having what she called a town hall meeting at Yale, and she. I think the Yale authorities kind of backed off sponsoring it, but they did allow her to hold it there. And so she organized a conference. She had me and Robert J. Liston and Jim Gilligan speak, and as well as a psychiatrist at Yale named Charles Dyke, who defended the traditional stance of psychiatry on this, which is called the Goldwater Rule, and basically...
You should explain that just in a few sentences, if you will.
Go
ahead.
This is Dee. I can explain that, too. And it happened as more mental health professionals began to speak out. And at that time, that engendered controversy among our colleagues because of the Goldwater Rule. Mm-hmm. And just to give a little context of that, during Barry Goldwater's run for the presidency in 1964, a magazine polled about 1,100 psychiatrists around the mental health of the candidate. Mm-hmm. They rendered opinions about his mental fitness without seeing him for an evaluation. Mm-hmm. After the election, Goldwater sued the magazine for libel and won. Mm-hmm. As a result, the American Psychiatric Association instituted the Goldwater Rule, which prohibits psychiatrists from diagnosing an individual without a face-to-face evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yes. Go
and further, when increasing numbers of mental health professionals began to raise concerns about Donald Trump's mental instability, the APA added another new prescription against offering any opinion about Donald Trump's mental health.
Mm-hmm. But then there's also the duty to warn concept, which I find very interesting.
Exactly.
You know, in international relations, we now have very young, very recent, only a few years, the concept of responsibility to protect, which is the first time that the United Nations has ever taken a stand that in some cases, like, incipient genocide, that national sovereignty doesn't matter, and there's a responsibility to go in and protect human life when it's about to be lost in massive numbers. And the duty to warn is a sort of domestic and mental and psychological version of that. So please explain the background of that.
Yeah, exactly right. This is Dee again. Exactly right. The obligation is derived from the concept of the landmark Tarasoff decision decided by the California Supreme Court in 1976, which states that if patients disclose to their therapist that they intend to injure specific individuals, the therapists have a duty to warn those individuals. The Tarasoff decision, it ultimately created a legal duty to protect that actually overrode the confidentiality of the therapist-patient relationship. And it was subsequently adopted in other states in various forms, and it's become a standard of mental health practice.
So back to the conference then, Judy.
What happened after the conference is that many people got in touch with Bandy, and it turned out that there had been a number of mental health professionals who had been getting up petitions to Congress and in various ways organizing and speaking out and expressing the anxiety that so many of us feel, that this is not a stable person and this is a dangerous person to be having any access to weapons, let alone nuclear weapons.
Yes.
I received an email from a literary agent in New York saying, would you like to write a book on this subject? Because, I think this is timely. I basically said, no, I couldn't do that by myself. But what about contacting Bandy Lee, who has just put together this whole conference and has put together this listserv and is really sort of the point person for organizing public awareness on this matter.
It's a remarkable achievement because there are 27 psychiatrists and other mental health professionals, psychologists, etc., who are weighing in on the narcissism aspect of Trump, the paranoia, the authoritarian streak. Many of us lay people out here say, is he mad or is he crazy like a fox? Not me. I've never done the crazy like a fox. I've said crazy, really disturbed from the very first moment that he emerged in New York, as a matter of fact, as a real estate developer. And I think that was because I once was in an abusive relationship and recognized it. But in any event, it smells the same, it looks the same, it tastes the same. It's just, you think, I know this. Why is this familiar? But there are many people who have, posited, he's not mad, he's just bad. And the main theme of the book, I think, if anything, is that you can be both at the same time. You can be clever,
right.
Without being intelligent. You can be, mad and, or mad is a loaded term, but you can be a severely disturbed person and also somebody who is motivated by malevolence, and they're not mutually exclusive. And there are voices in this that analyze all aspects of his personality, from his behavior, and it is demonstrably stunning behavior. So, we're going to take a brief break right now and then come back, and I want to talk about that behavior and also and especially about the impact on the rest of us, the American public, because it looks to be severe, traumatic, anxiety-provoking, understatement, and maybe have a long tail even after we get rid of him. And I think we need to hear from you about that and what we can do about it. But right now we need to take that short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We will be right back with some more of our Roundtable.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back with Nanette Gartrell, Dee Mosbacher, and Judith Herman. three remarkable psychiatric experts on the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. And they are three of the contributors to this remarkable book. They are three of that 27. Judith, maybe let's pick up with you. Could we talk for a bit about an analysis of Trump's behavior? I mean, obviously it's not a psychoanalysis because you haven't had him under analysis. And God help you, whoever would. Not that he ever will submit himself. But talk about that behavior and what it tells you.
Well, perhaps I can quote from another letter that Robert Lifton and I wrote to the New York Times, also expressing our alarm. Yeah. And the Times must have been alarmed enough so that they printed it. Mm-hmm. And we just said, even within the space of a few weeks, the demands of the presidency have magnified his erratic patterns of behavior. In particular, we are struck by his repeated failure to distinguish between reality and fantasy, and his outbursts of rage when his fantasies are contradicted.
Yeah. Without
any demonstrable evidence, he repeatedly resorts to paranoid claims of conspiracy. When faced with a crisis, President Trump will lack the judgment to respond rationally. The military powers entrusted to him endanger us all. So, those were some of the characteristics that we thought showed evidence of his dangerousness, and it's really the dangerousness concept that we're concerned about here rather than any particular psychiatric diagnosis.
Of course.
This is Nanette. I think it's also important for all of us to remember that Donald Trump said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose voters. And we can't wait until he starts shooting before doing something. Yeah, exactly. We need to disarm him now. He doesn't have a gun. Yeah. He has a nuclear arsenal.
Yes. And he's warned us. I mean, he's been honest. That's the irony. He said all along, this is who I am. And the capacity for compartmentalization and denial must be pretty amazing in the American public. I want to talk about the effect on the American public for a bit, and then I want to get to the 25th Amendment solution and the proposal of evaluation by a panel of experts that Dee and Nanette have raised in their article in The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. The American public, okay, so both the good news and the bad news. Good news because of the statistics, bad news because we even have to be in this place to begin with. More than not only is your book on the bestseller list, which means people are very anxious, but more than 3/4 to this day, of Republicans, 77%, approve of his job as president. But overall, 56% say he's reckless, 54% say he's not stable, 51% say he's not honest. 77% say he lacks empathy and compassion. And it goes, on and on. So ironically, in a poll that just came out, Robert Mueller has a much higher rating, of people who approve of the way he's handling his job. He's at 58% approval. So, but none of that seems to affect Trump's behavior, which to me is another sign of his insular, sort of solipsistic universe. So two questions to all of you. Number one, those people who will self-identify with Trump until he croaks, or they do, are they just suffering from Stockholm syndrome, or is it a matter of their identifying with him so much that it goes to the core of their existence? Is there any way to reach them, or do we just turn away from that to begin with? And the other is the general mass of the rest of us who have been, from the moment he appeared on the national screen and stage, very, very anxious. My own medical doctor, when I went for a checkup shortly after the election, said to me, I said, I'm a nervous wreck, I'm not sleepy. She said, all my patients are saying that. And I know there are people who address this in the book as well. Can you give us your expertise or your thoughts even on first the group of diehards who no matter what don't seem to change, and then more importantly than that, the rest of us, and how we deal with this. I don't mean that you have to give us the answer to everything, but anything will be appreciated.
This is Dee. If only we had that answer to everything. But I think it's quite a combination of that kernel of the American public that has always been the clanners, the homophobes, the xenophobes, and all of that. There's always been that kernel.
Yes, there has.
But it's never been allowed to pop, and it's popped.
Well, he gave it permission to pop.
Yes, yeah. He put it on the stove and it popped. The other piece, I have to say, I think that there is also a cohort of American people who are truly desperate.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And felt that they had been left behind and didn't see any way forward except to really sort of break the paradigm. And I think Nanette can talk about
the rest
what's
of
happened to the rest of us anxious well.
In my 42 years of clinical practice as a psychiatrist, and I'm still practicing, I have never seen the kind of reaction to a presidential election that I have seen after this presidential election. And the phenomenon has variously been called Donald Trump stress disorder, the Donald Trump anxiety disorder. And I and my colleagues with whom I consult very regularly are having clients since the election come in report, just like you described, Robin, severe anxiety. They feel helpless, hopeless. They have sleep problems. People are grinding their teeth to the point that I mean, this is the most, I think, graphic illustration of the stress. I had a conversation with a UCSF professor of dentistry about the fact that people are complaining so much of face pain because they're grinding their teeth at night. And she said she had a flood of healthy patients with healthy teeth come in since the election with their teeth crumbling.
My God.
Literally crumbling.
Yeah.
So people, they have these feelings of anxiety, people that hair loss, and then when they talk about their specific fears, the fears of nuclear war, they fear that Donald Trump has no understanding of its consequences. They're very frightened about their personal safety, afraid of losing their civil rights, especially those targeted by his racism, sexism, transphobia, Islamophobia, etc. People are very worried about environmental catastrophes affecting clean air and water because of all the recent toxins, floods, fires. And everybody across the board, whether they have health insurance or not, they're very, very frightened about losing it, and especially those with pre-existing conditions.
Of course.
That's just a capsule summary of what we're seeing in clinical practice these days. Yeah. And also a lot more people who've never had psychotherapy or psychiatric treatment coming in and seeking antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications for the first time.
Yeah. Is there anything we can do about that other than fight the way we do? I mean, I think that the organizing that's taken place at grassroots levels, both spontaneously and interlinkedly and with less fighting among progressives, is very heartening to me. I was terrified that after the Women's March, people would go home and business as usual. And of course, that's not what happened. It's got sustained and heightened. That's clearly one way because, at least for me, capacity, agency, doing something about it helps me with my personal anxiety and teeth grinding. Anything else you can suggest?
This is Dee. It's amazing, Robin, that given that Donald Trump has direct access to the nuclear arsenal, it's really astonishing that we have no way of evaluating whether he or any other president is mentally and physically fit to assume this responsibility.
That's shocking.
Even though military personnel who are charged with relaying and executing nuclear orders from the president must undergo rigorous medical psychological and financial evaluations to determine their fitness for duty.
But not the one who not the one who gives the order. Yeah, if there's a silver lining to this, it's that it has exposed so many of the norms that we think of as being in law that aren't. And that really do need to be codified. That being one of many, but things that, like, of course you display your tax returns. Of course you do. You're running for the presidency of the United States, but that's not in the law. So his skill, such as it is a skill of criminality, which detects where the loopholes and flaws are and then exploits them.
You're exactly right, Robin. And we actually, our chapter in the book does talk about a solution to this omission, this glaring omission that you just pointed out.
Yes.
The 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Presidential Disability and Succession, Section 4 of this amendment has never been invoked to evaluate whether a president is fit to serve.
Right.
So we exhort Congress to use this section to impanel an independent, impartial group of experts to evaluate whether this and future presidents and vice presidents are mentally fit to fulfill the duties of office. Basically, we recommend that Congress immediately constitute an independent, nonpartisan panel of mental health and medical experts to evaluate Donald Trump's capability to fulfill the responsibilities of the presidency. We feel the panel should consist of 3 neuropsychiatrists, 1 clinical psychologist, 1 neurologist, and 2 internists. Importantly, we feel that the panel members should be nominated by the nonpartisan, non-governmental National Academy of Medicine. Mm-hmm. The experts should serve 6-year terms with a provision that 1 member per year be rotated off and replaced. Congress should enact legislation to authorize this panel to perform comprehensive mental health and medical evaluations of the president and vice president on an annual basis. This legislation should require the panel to evaluate all future presidential and vice presidential candidates. The panel should also be empowered to conduct emergency evaluations should there be an acute change in the mental or physical health of the president or vice president. And these evaluations should be kept strictly confidential unless the panel determines that the mental health or medical condition of the president or vice president renders him or her incapable of fulfilling the duties of office. Mm. Well, we just feel this must be initiated immediately because we just really can't afford to become inured to the dangerousness of Donald Trump.
It's the normalization of Trumpism that is the most terrifying thing of all. I also want to just touch on, before we have to go, I could talk for hours with you 3 wonderful brains about this. But you're all, in one way or another, have been involved in trauma studies. And Judith, I know that you even received something about, I think it was a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. How long? I mean, the American. I guess what I'm basically asking is, can we recover from this? I believe we can. How do we recover?
Oh, sure.
Oh, well, that's good. Oh, sure. Oh, that was a quick response that made my day.
Yeah, this is a situational matter. When the situation changes, the anxiety should be relieved right away. We see this even with severely traumatized refugees, for example, when they are petitioning for asylum. If their petition is granted, their post-traumatic stress symptoms are relieved almost overnight. All of a sudden, people will say, I slept through the night for the first time in years, because they feel safer. It's the feeling of safety or the feeling of danger that determines how how aroused we are, how anxious we are. When the dangerous situation changes, there's no reason for us to remain so anxious, and we won't. I did want to add, as my mama used to say, that activism is the antidote to despair, and Robin, you pointed that out as well. It's all very well to exhort Congress to follow these excellent recommendations, but the truth is that there's no chance of this happening with the Congress as currently constituted. So we need to change that.
That's right.
And there's lots of work to be done between now and the next election.
Yes. Oh, my dear, yes. And as April Ryan said on this program recently, she is the White House correspondent for Black Urban Networks, and she said this will change, Congress will change, the Republican-held Congress, or it's not even the Republican Party that I once knew, I don't know what to call it, the right-wing Congress, that they will change on two accounts. When Mueller drops more shoes, enough to scare them, and I think Mueller is doing that in a very principled and connect the dots way, careful, due diligence, and the other being their numbers, and the numbers of the American public.
Yes.
And of course, and because that scares them. So, but whatever they change or don't change, we all have an opportunity to organize toward and go to the polls next year and change this. It lies within our hands, and the prospect of agency, of being able to do something about it, cuts right through the despair. You're quite right, like a butter knife. So I'm deeply grateful to each one of you, Nanette Gartrell, Dee Mosbacher, Judith Herman, for all the work that you've done starting this ball rolling, and for the current result, the dangerous case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. From St. Martin's Press. It will make a great holiday present, and read it for yourself and give it to everybody you know. There's a reason it's on the bestseller list. It's also just fascinating reading. And as I understand it, the 25th Amendment doesn't take the long process of impeachment. It can at least deactivate a president in 48 hours. So it's something to think about. Thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, and for all the work each of you great women do every day. Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you.
would say the same to you, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And thank you for all that you've done on behalf of women everywhere, Robin.
And now a brief word from my lower self. You may be one of the people wondering, what in God's name was Donna Brazile thinking? In a new book, she tries to pass off old news as a fresh headline and wildly exaggerates the power she held as interim head of the Democratic National Committee, or DNC. She accuses Hillary's campaign of having bought the DNC and then tilting its weight against Bernie Sanders. Brazile also claims that after Hillary fainted that one time from walking pneumonia, that she, Donna, considered dropping Hillary from the ticket and choosing Biden instead. Well, leaving aside for the moment their destructiveness, the problem with both these stories is they're neither new nor true. Hillary herself has written at length that after she won the nomination, her campaign was appalled to find the DNC utterly bankrupt. Party building had not been a priority of Obama's, especially not since he already won his second term. HRC had to give much of what she'd raised for her own campaign to the DNC instead, just to keep it going, and for down-ticket races as well. Candidates usually do some version of this, though not quite as lavishly as she was forced to. The same appeal went to Sanders, but not even being a Democrat himself, he said, nah. Hillary's people were then understandably uncomfortable that the same inept folks who had driven the DNC into bankruptcy might continue running it once its coffers had been replenished, so part of the deal was that her campaign would have some say about the new leadership. This, too, is standard, and she wrote about it. As for Brazile having considered dumping Hillary from the ticket, oh, please. It's not in the power of the DNC director to do that. It's also never been done. Furthermore, the rules delineate a long, complex process involving many people, were that ever to be initiated as a process. Donna, considered by some for decades to be a bit of a loose cannon, claims that she loves and wants to save the Democratic Party, which witty political analyst Joy Reid likened to the infamous statement by a GI during the Vietnam War, quote, "We had to destroy the village in order to save it." So thanks, Donna, for driving a wedge deeper between progressives when unity is so especially crucial. And while you're at it, Donna, why not attack Hillary? She hasn't yet been drawn, quartered, and flayed alive in the village square. I'm sure the Podesta types and the DNC could have treated you better, Donna, but the poor boys were tuckered out from having made Debbie Wasserman Schultz a scapegoat, so they just lacked the energy. We know you lost your paying gig at MSNBC and lost your columns and fell into general disrepute, but that's no reason to give the hard right ammunition as fake as their own so-called facts. You might sell a few more copies of your book, but you've sold out yourself, sold out progressive unity, and sold up the river the concept of, excuse the word, sisterhood. And, you know, the next opportunist who wants to stomp on Hillary's head will have to face me first, crouched in the battle pose and snarling, "Back the hell off." And it's time for one last pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with what you expect. Yes, some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to some fighting words. Of all the actions, demonstrations, and marches I've had my part in organizing, probably the one most associated with me is the first Miss America pageant protest in 1968, the one that some people flatteringly, if inaccurately, call the birth of contemporary feminism. Beauty pageants, as you can imagine, are so not my favorite things, and if nothing else were offensive about Donald Trump, his having once owned the Miss Universe contest so that he could have private ooglings of contestants would be sufficient for me to put him in the lowest ring of male supremacist hell. So you can imagine my surprise to hear about a pageant where feminism actually won. Last Sunday, viewers of the Miss Peru pageant en route to the Miss Universe contest were stunned when 23 contestants walked on stage, introduced themselves, started saying the usual, "My measurements are," but instead stated facts like these. More than 70% of all women in Peru suffer street harassment. 13,000 Peruvian girls are victims of sexual abuse. More than 25% of Peruvian girls and teenagers are abused in school. A hashtag was born instantly. Mis medidas son, my measurements are, and it went viral. Luciana Olivares, the content and strategy manager for Frecuencia Latina, that's the TV network that broadcasts the competition, she stated, quote, "We definitely have wanted a different Miss Peru, but it was only during the last weeks when it became obvious we needed a cry against violence on women." Close quote. The previous Sunday, a volunteer working for the National Census had been raped while conducting the poll at the home of a man. Social media had exploded with the theme that Peru was a country of rapists. Lima, the capital, does rank 5th on the list of the most dangerous megacities for women in a newly released poll by the Thomson Reuters Foundation. Last month, the president of the Peruvian Congressional Commission on Women and Family was forced out after saying that victims of femicide bring the attacks unwittingly on themselves. The Prime Minister herself, Mercedes Aroaz, revealed last year that she had been in an abusive relationship. So, Olivares and the network came up with the idea of having contestants shout out the statistics, and the idea was endorsed and carried out by the pageant, which is led by former beauty queen Jessica Newton and Sequoia Productions, a company that produces the TV show. Since it was watched around the world, it had quite an impact. Instead of debating which contestant was the most beautiful, the topic was violence, says Olivares. We shifted the conversation. They certainly did. Look, I still hold no brief for beauty pageants, but I know that many women of lower economic means enter for the college scholarship. So, to any women involved with those few contests that still stagger on, relics of a past era, I suggest you do well to learn a lesson from this. Better that beauty pageants go the way of the dinosaur, but while press coverage still exists, it can be used to change consciousness, help women, save lives. You know, that would be beautiful. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.